Hello, we're here speaking with Patrick Devanney from Classlink. Patrick, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and your work with Classlink?
Sure. I'm Patrick Devanney. I'm the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Partnerships at Classlink. And anyone who's not familiar with Classlink, we are a middleware solution that focuses on identity access management and rostering solutions, as well as analytics. So a quick way to look at it is we kind of make it easy for technology to be used in education. And that requires connecting systems together in many different ways. So that's really kind of my interest in interoperability.
Excellent. So you brought it up. Let's go ahead and define data interoperability. How do you define that?
So data is what gets exchanged with interoperability. And the concept of interoperability is bringing disparate systems together to create a greater value from the fact that they work together. So the sum is greater than the end result is greater than the sum of the parts. When we look at interoperability, there are some real key functions that happen all the time. We use rostering as a great example. Information is sourced by typically the student information system, but then we create a product that allows customers and our customers, our school districts, to share that with all of the applications that their community uses. And with the sharing of this data, accounts are created for those users, and those accounts can just be regular user accounts, or they can actually be structured in a class with the teacher and the students all in the right class. Another example of interoperability is for single sign-on, so that users can securely and easily log into many, many systems without having to enter in usernames and passwords. And we do this through secure exchange of data in interoperability of sorts.
Excellent. That last example that you gave, I think so many people can resonate with that. That's definitely adding convenience to user experience.
Well, and one of the interesting things about single sign-on is that its availability has grown tremendously. And it started off with storing a username and a password and entering it in for the user, but it's far more sophisticated now, and in fact uses back channels between the systems to exchange non-PII information, and really makes the whole process of authentication much, much more secure.
Excellent. That's great. So kind of taking this and moving it into the realm of education, how can access to more, or even the exchange of data, help in education?
So this is a trend that I see only accelerating in the years to come. When we talk about education and good education practices and principles, they very often rely on personalizing or individualizing the instruction for students. Making access or making additional data available to teachers helps inform the instructional method, helps inform the area of focus or the amount of intervention or support that individual students get. And it is personalized very much in their to their specific needs. So when we look at education, we're talking about adding all sorts of strengths and new abilities and new ways of customizing it for an individual learner when the teacher has access to more data about those individuals.
Excellent. If someone was, kind of outside the world of education, would you be able to give any types of, this is just a follow-up question, any type of example about specific student data that might be helpful in creating a customized experience for the student?
Sure. So very often screener assessments are used, and that identifies a student's mastery of a particular skill, and typically is done based upon the standards, the learning standards that the student has to accomplish throughout the course of the year, or the teacher has to teach throughout the course of the year. With access to that screener information immediately and real time for the teacher to see Johnny struggled with this particular skill, then the teacher is able to hone in or make assignments in other systems that the student can use to learn that particular skill. So they're not wasting time on things they already know, or they're not attempting to learn things that one of the building blocks is not present for. and it makes the learning process more efficient and really helps accomplish greater learning.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely sounds like it helps to streamline the process.
Mm-hmm.
So we've touched on a bit of the benefits. There's got to be at least some risks involved. Would you be able to kind of illustrate a little bit of what risks are involved, and then talk about how do you balance the risks of data sharing with the benefits?
Sure. Well, and this is really near and dear to where I think the industry is right now and some of the challenges that we're facing. We've all experienced news of breaches and data being corrupted somewhere at a bank or at a grocery store, or credit card information. Healthcare information is often a feared breach. And the same is true with education, especially with students, because in the dark web, if you have a student's identity today, they could go 15 years and before they would even know that it was being used by somebody else. So there's real danger there. And ultimately what it comes down to is you have to minimize the number of places where the data could be corrupted, could be breached. You have to put the control of who sees this data and how it's shared in the hands of the fiduciary, which is the school system that the student is attending. So it's very important that those principles be maintained. I think also the schools don't necessarily have the capacity built in easily to do this management. So they need to have help. And that's where products like Classlink come in. And there's others that are out there. I think the industry as a whole, however, has to be very, very careful and make sure that the incentives and the support are properly placed with the school districts. Some of the other companies that are in the ed tech space will, in fact, pay each other money for services in exchange data. And in some cases, that kind of incents them to share more data. So we really firmly believe in a couple of principles. Number one, that the school district owns the data, they maintain it, they manage it, and we provide tools to make that easier. We never exchanged any kind of money with any of our partners. Even though we have technical integrations with them, we do that to create a better experience for the user, the school district, and the users in the school district, but we never exchange any money between us. So we're committed to the school district. And if we follow those principles and find as many ways as possible to avoid sharing any data that doesn't have to be shared, I believe the benefits thoroughly outweigh the risks. When we, however, share too much or kind of lose track of why we're sharing, I think there can be risks, and we have to be very careful with that.
Absolutely. Thank you for outlining, those real principles of security, because it does, you've outlined the risks, and it is so important to maintain the security.
I would add another point to that, and there's some research that was done by Microsoft, and basically, I'm pretty sure it was Microsoft that did it. They said that a school district is as equally or relatively the same risk of a breach as an ed tech company. And at first you thought that makes perfect sense, but the reality of it is the danger is far greater because a school district has one school district's data. An ed tech company that has a platform could have dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of school districts users in that platform. So when we talk about sharing, it's very, very important to minimize how much is actually shared, minimize the number of places a breach might happen. We've created a product, and many of the standards, I don't know if we'll talk about standards or not, but the standard bodies that define how interoperability happens are working on ways to exchange data without actually having it reside in platforms. They would reside strictly at the school district, and you could use non-identifiable identifiers, so to speak, or non-PII identifiers to keep track of a user's progress and so on and so forth. but the platform wouldn't actually hold the PII. So there are some really interesting ways that the industry is addressing this. My company, Classlink, has a product called Data Guard, which helps with this. We also thoroughly promote restricting the sharing of data if it's not necessary. So I think there are a lot of efforts. I didn't want it to sound like this is all doom and gloom. I think there's a lot of efforts to continue to improve security.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, that's great. Thank you for sharing all of that. It sounds like Classlink and the industry as a whole is really addressing the security, that part of it. So I want to move now to the cost, financial costs. So connecting data systems costs real money. So how do we maximize the return on this investment?
Great. Well, I will have the chance to talk about standards bodies then. So I mentioned before the principle around not paying other companies. I think that there are absolute costs to creating the ability for systems to interoperate, to exchange data. The first thing that I would highlight is there are organizations, standards bodies, that define what the structure of that exchange would be. Organization, a couple of them are EdFi is one, A4L is one, One Ed Tech is another, and they perform functions for the ed tech interoperability standards, much like IEEE does with electrical standards. You know, when you take a plug, it's shaped the way that it's shaped to fit into the receptacle in the wall, and when you plug it in, it will work. The same concept is true with interoperability standards in ed tech, that a data provider and a data receiver are expecting data to be formatted in certain ways, certain frequencies, certain data structures. And with that, the flow of data is guaranteed to happen. It also allows for technology companies to build one interface and use it multiple times. So all of these, there's multiple companies that will receive rostering data from Classlink, for example, and that uses the one roster standard. So we share it with them and they receive it. They know what they're expecting to receive, and they build one set of software to receive that data. And it doesn't matter where it comes from. If it's coming in one roster standard, they'll be able to use it. So building to standards is very, very important to get the most bang for the buck. The second scenario, the second thing that I would add to that is this financial model. And the most efficient financial model is for the ultimate benefactor of a service to pay for it directly. So let me explain that a little bit. If I am one company and I'm charging another company for us to exchange data, the company that pays me not only has to recover the cost that they've paid me, but that's money that they could have spent on development. So they have to get developing their product more, or new features or greater capabilities. So when they pay me, they have to get a return on that. Their investors are expecting a return, and that's money that's not available for other things. So it actually drives up the cost if they are paying me for that data, versus if the customer buys a service from both of us and we don't charge each other any money. That's the fastest path to the source of the money, because in the ed tech space, schools are ultimately the source of all the money. So one thing is to use standards. Another thing is to use an appropriate financial model that has the ultimate benefactor of the service paying for it. And partners or organizations that work together don't pay each other, but rather the customer pays for the services they get.
That's excellent. Yeah, I love what you said about the organizations that work together not paying each other. That's just going to incentivize unnecessary sharing. Mm-hmm. That's great. It's the efficiency is built right in. Excellent. Okay. Well, one final question that I have here. What are the greatest opportunities as well as the greatest risks moving forward that you see, as well as any trends that you see that you might want to elaborate on?
So the trends that I see are just an acceleration of the need for data. There's no question. There are more and more places where additional data can help. I think one of the risks is getting people to lean into the security question enough and realize that they don't really have to have all the data that they shared historically, and that they have to be cautious about how they share it. Sending a file as an attachment to an email is not a particularly safe way to send any data. So when I say they have to lean into it, it's every single stakeholder in this chain. It's not just the schools. It's not just the companies. It also includes the communities and the parents, and it includes everybody that has any possible exposure to this. We understand the risks. We have to make sure that we're willing to make maybe some mild convenience compromises or sacrifices, but in doing so, the return will be multifold. I would envision that the next real kind of accelerator on this is going to be the use of AI, because AI requires a lot of, artificial intelligence requires a lot of access to data. So again, it's a slippery slope. If it gets out and it's in the ecosystem somewhere out and about, you can't pull it back. So it's really important that we get onto the security, lean into it, make sure we're doing all the right things, because the AI kind of evolution is starting, and that will be out there very fast. With that is the counter to the question, which is, what are the opportunities? And to think about how you can really enhance learning, enhance teaching, and enrich the opportunities for the learner with artificial intelligence, providing greater access to tools and to methods. I think it's almost inconceivable how much we're going to be able to benefit from it. But as we've talked a couple of times here, there's a risk and reward. There's a balance. So we have to stay on top of that.
Absolutely. Anything else that you might want to add today that we haven't touched on?
I think that when we start talking about interoperability, it's almost, I use the term evolution. At times, it's almost a revolution. We really have to rethink fundamentally how we do some of these things. If we keep making minor improvements, certainly there's benefit to that. But we need to make some transformational changes. I think that our education system has evolved very, very slowly through the years. And that's important because it's our kids and we have to take care of them. And we don't want to take undue risks or chances. But I think now we have a lot of tools at our disposal. And I think that some of these are going to really be transformative. And I think that we have to get together as a community and as, parents and students and educators and figure out what we really can do. I think that the extremes are kind of dangerous. So we have to find ways to avoid some of those. But there's real opportunities if we work together. And I think this is a place where investment pays off in spades.
Absolutely. One question that I kind of thought of as you were speaking just now, we touched on AI a bit, and that's been a big topic that we've covered, time and again. You mentioned at times it's a need for for some transformational change and almost revolutionary change, I guess, in the industry. Are there other ways that we haven't talked about that you see AI being that impetus for change?
Sure. The first thing that comes to mind is that of equity. And I've already seen places where we have failed or ignored to really recognize this. When you look at large language models, they are particularly white and particularly, Anglo-Saxon kind of language that's used. And learners that are of color, learners that have different dialects are left out of opportunity. Yet some energy on that on the front end could do an awful lot to accelerate their equitable access to education and the tools and all the resources that are available. Think about then all the contributions they can make with that extra help. There's just, it multiplies. It's a multiplying effect. It's a compounding effect. So, that's the first thing that comes to mind. I think the next thing that really comes to mind is the ability for a lot more autonomous styles of learning and a continuation of learning. So I think in many cases, people of my generation, we went to school, we went to college, if we went to college, grad school, and then we were done. And I think that with AI in particular, the opportunity for learners to continue to learn throughout their life will be enhanced.
Absolutely. Well, Patrick, thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been a great conversation. So happy to speak with you. And thank you for all the great work you're doing with Classlink.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.